As we finish up our time introducing the subject, it's clear to me that the hardest aspect of it is not the idea that we're at war with an enemy that we can't see or that we have to love each other, but rather what the winning strategy for doing this is, and what the tools of that war are. And the winning strategy is to have the tool of philosophy firmly geared toward a creation through a love that edifies. And we can easily affirm the life-giving nature of God's message, tactics, and tools, but the truth is we tend to distance ourselves from them in practical ways. We want to diminish the responsibility we have to create by relegating it to a niche field of expression. But is not everything to be an expression of praise? Is not every vocation to be done with mastery and intent? Now Paul says, in everything we do, whether we eat or drink, we should do it all unto the glory of God. But the truth is that we don't want to do everything to the glory of God. We don't want to do that. We don't want to think that eating or drinking are to be an art form that say something about who God is and who we are. And we don't want to be creators in that way. The truth is that we don't want to say that we are creating when we are creating. Creation, ironically, has been reduced to the act of rearrangement and manipulation, and often and increasingly so, destruction. And this is now our new definition of art, and this alone. And this is often confusing for us because we've lost even the idea of creation, and we've relegated it only to the so-called artists. And the majority of you have erroneously held that you are only an artist if you can manipulate a tool of art. And these are relegated to things like pencils and paints and poetry and prose. But art is just the beautiful given form. And artistry describes the agency that one has to accomplish this beautiful thing by his intent. Because of things like agency and intent, every creator is therefore an artist by nature, though not every artist is a creator. And there's a multitude of artists who erroneously seek to be called creators when their art is actually catabolic. But that's not true of the godly. And doing anything in a godly manner is artistry, because all godly things require intent to submit to God's providence and direction. And godly behavior can't be stumbled into. See, because every Christian is by nature a creative, everything he does is art. And that's to say that everything he is to do is to be a creative exercise of his humanity. Not the false destructive version presented to us by Satan, but the type that constructs, that repairs, that engineers, that articulates and meticulously themes everything toward God himself and encourages exploration and excitement. Now, you probably didn't see what I did there, but I actually snuck in an acronym for you, something that I hope helps you remember components that should be in everything you do. And if you do these things and you're giving to the Commonwealth without knowing how to hold a pen or how to straddle a pottery wheel, then you will actually be creating in a proper way. So C is for constructing, and it's building the Commonwealth, and R is for repairing, for maintaining the Commonwealth, and E is for engineering, designing it. A is for articulating, improving it. T is for theming, unifying the Commonwealth around a theme. E is for encouraging, inspiring the Commonwealth. And I'll give you an example of how this connects in areas beyond the canvas. So let's go back to marriage. Those of you who have seen how the elders handle marriage counseling know that we all emphasize certain ingredients in every marriage. A marriage should be something that is strategized. A marriage must be thoroughly discussed, starting with each person setting forth their needs. It should be something that's vulnerable. Any issues currently or from the past have to be brought up and dealt with accordingly. It should be something that is accountable. There should be partners of accountability in counseling, but also in mentorship. All of that should be pursued, as well as emphasizing basic discipline goals such as date nights, church attendance, all that stuff. It should be goal-oriented. Time and expectations are laid out for accomplishing a shift to these things. There should be a clarity of intent. There should be an encouragement to define the third person created by the union as one who reflects the fruit of the Spirit is proffered, as well as the demand that each partner conform to their biblical roles. And it should be a strong partnership. They should be together in everything that makes sense and rely on the other person and build mindshare for that partnership. So if you break that down, strategy is construction, vulnerability is repair, accountability is engineering, goal-oriented relationships are articulation, clarity of identity is theming, and strong partnership is encouragement. And all of this is blessed by God, and it's used to create something new without destroying what was once there. And all parties grow stronger, and sometimes God blesses this with a literal new life. And a marriage that has all of these elements shouldn't be thought of without the acknowledgement that these two people alongside God are artists. They're crafting something. that is essentially, in its essence, good. And I give you this example because I noted earlier that marriage is the essential building block for our society. But because of this, you ought to be able to now see how this isn't just a relegated truth, not just to marriage or art. The idea that our interactions can be creative without a physical canvas is something that you must explore. And it will continue to be explored from the leadership. And that you are being challenged to explore today. In what ways have you not realized that you are a creator? Perhaps the more important question is, in what ways have you been destructive because you have refused to be creative? And this is the crux of the next 5 years. All interactions are going to be seen as a choice to create life through God's gospel or a choice to destroy life without it. And this has to be a stand that you will have to be willing to take. You have to pledge to wage war upon the catabolic ideology of the serpent. In any facet that you find it, hiding in any corner, you have to stamp it out. You have to leave no room for its growth. So let's return to explore my point further. Let's ask a few questions. Is it a point of common humor among those who are familiar with your relationship with your spouse about how disconnected you are and that you're not on the same page? Have you always thought it charming to point out inept or unrespectable things about their life? Do you reject any sort of guidance from outside sources? Not the least of which is the church, because that would be meddling and a violation of your personal sovereignty. Could it easily be said that you and your spouse are simply roommates with benefits? Are you internally laughing now at the idea of benefits and having them at all as you've grown older? Are your friends and your spouse's friends kept separate, purposefully, because to connect them would be weird? Is your relationship with God your own belief and not something your spouse is allowed to breach with accountability or expectation? Now, I've been marriage counseling for 2 decades, and even one yes to any of these questions is a sign of a catabolic relationship. One of these statements is always true, and often more than one in any divorce or breakup that I've ever counseled. Eventually, the other person will destroy their spouse, often their kids, in order to have a pseudo-stability in their lives that can't be provided by a marriage that basically no longer shines. And I want to make a special note of something on this point. We have to stop saying that this type of marriage has a real love and therefore it gets a pass on being scrutinized. First of all, let's get our terms straight. No, it doesn't. We need to have a higher respect for love than that. Biblical love is holy. Affection alone is not biblical love. Enjoying one another is not biblical love. Even a desire for the best of another is not biblical love. One has to be willing to lose something of themselves for the other person for it to begin to be real biblical love. And that thing is generally their life. And they have to be willing to take this loss because they believe it will accomplish a stronger relationship with God for that person. And don't get all up on my case because you think that statement somehow nullifies your relationship, because it qualifies you as needing to use a standard other than yourself when considering someone else's good. If you don't do that good, then it quickly just becomes good enough. And your fear is probably justified because your love is probably not actually loving. And don't try to get right with me about that. Get right with God. You can't stumble into loving someone. If there's a price you aren't willing to pay for someone's morality or safety, then it's not actually loving them. If you haven't considered what's best for them when you took that bullet for them, you're not being romantic. You're being an idiot, even if they did get saved in the process. So stop telling me and yourself that the relationship which just kind of happened and which you think has the right to end in divorce is a loving one. It's time to stop handing out participation ribbons to subpar humans. These people are not creating anything but a wake of destruction, sometimes whole legacies of it. Only truth and the willingness to proclaim it can change that, not your romanticism, which is itself catabolic. Stop devouring them so you can feel good about your subpar machinations on what's good and beautiful. God is much more clever, a storyteller, than you. It's time to tell his truth, because this is a war. It's a war of ideology on creation that you are just popping popcorn for. And we need to understand that these are actual people that are cannibalizing each other while you are entertained and while I and my fellow church workers try to clean up their messes. It's a problem in every facet of life, in every field. They call themselves creatives as they steadily dismantle everything that God actually created, and then they parade it around and shame us if we don't do the same. Stop helping them by being so weak in your discernment. Stop being so weak in your focus and your ability to think beyond this moment and the shiny thing about them that you might find cute or affirming or distracting. Don't just love God with your heart, but you have to love him also with your mind. We've been called into a new life, to be a people who don't destroy, but create. Aren't you pretending that you're just finding the good when you're really just avoiding the bad?